Okay, so I want to get into a little bit of this idea that I had this morning that just sort of popped up in my head out of the blue. And you'll probably, if you're listening to this, we'll probably need to have some prior understanding of cursory knowledge of Tibetan Buddhism, but more importantly, the concept of the bardo, what that entails, as I'm probably not going to give any kind of real in-depth explanation of what that in fact is, simply because I'm not an expert. My own knowledge is very rudimentary, say. But yeah, there's some fun contemporary media that uses that concept as a source of inspiration. Say that I would point you to anyway if you're not too familiar with it, or if you are familiar with it anyhow but have not simply seen or been exposed to these this contemporary media that just off the top of my head it has occurred to me, which is the book Ubik by Philip K. Dick, and the film Into the Void. Yeah, I'm sure there's many more, but those are just what it just initially just occurred to me just now. Yeah, and so anyway, as you can tell by the title, most probably if I have proceeded with it, titling it as I am thinking of doing so now, you already have some understanding of where I'm perhaps going to go with this. And it's, yeah, to put it quite simply, basically the idea that pornography is conditioning the individual on a subconscious level to, within this bardo, right, hypothetical bardo, I should preface that by saying this is all within the realm of hypotheticals here, and I'm simply just putting this out here as a what if such and such is the case, and this may also be the case. Within that point of the bardo, this state of extreme disorientation, of not necessarily knowing that one has passed on, that one has died, that one no longer is, that one is in this sort of liminal realm now. In this state of disorientation will, as is in line with the ideas of the bardo that they put forth, Tibetan Buddhists, one will see couples copulating, and will, intrigued, aroused, will seek to marry themselves with them, to interject their person into the proceedings, and thus will be reincarnated, will be, their essence will be enmeshed within the womb of the female counterpart of this coupling that is taking place, and that will be their new mother, and they will be born once again into the realm from which they had just passed. And this is why in Tibetan Buddhism in particular, mindfulness is so emphasized. The importance of is emphasized to the umpteenth degree. It is a core component of the practices of Tibetan Buddhism, is this cultivation of mindfulness, so that one will be acutely aware at all times, even at the point of death, where one is much more likely to be inclined towards not being conscious and aware of what is occurring, to be caught up in the turbulence of what is occurring, and thus will not know that they've passed, and will stumble into yet another life, and so on and so forth, again and again and again and again. And, okay, so, as you're probably aware, pornography has reached a point of hyper-normalisation within, at least, Western culture, which is, I guess, at this point, this stage in the game, one could make the case that Western culture is global culture, or at least is beginning to more and more rapidly approach such. And one has to, I mean, there are all sorts of, scientific, studies have been conducted now that sort of demonstrably show that it has these deleterious effects on the brain, most notably upon the dopaminergic systems of the brain. It causes this desensitization, anhedonia, so on. But on a more esoteric level, one has to wonder what is occurring, what is happening to that energy that is being displaced, right? This energy that, were it to be as nature intended, quote unquote, appropriately placed, would engender the birth of a new being. It would bring life into being. So, when this energy is being dispensed, into the ether, say, when the focus of this release of energy is not into the quote unquote appropriate place, but upon pixels on a screen, say, this very nebulous thing. Where is it going, right? Where is it going? This is sort of a sidetrack from the main point, but it's something that is also worth touching upon, I think. It's some idea that I considered some time before. Maybe writing a story about like a digital succubi or something like that. And I've seen that idea since floated around in other places, but that's neither here nor there, really. And of course, as we see that in magical circles, right, there's a long-standing precedence for this idea of sex magic, of charging sigils with one's sexual energy in order to manifest, to realize one's will, so on. But yes, so the main point anyway that I wanted to discuss here is about how the subconscious effect of this, right? How could it possibly be conditioning the brain to act in a hypothetical afterlife scenario, right? And because it's so, as I already said, hyper-normalized, the consumption of, right, is that one could very well go through a whole lifetime of consumption, of subconsciously conditioning their brain to respond in a positive manner towards such stimuli. so that at the point of death in this liminal afterlife, bardo space, having not, as is the default position of a human being here, not cultivated an acute state of mindfulness during their life, will be in this disorientated, befuddled, blundering, horny state, right? They'll be a slave still to the appetites that drove them forth throughout the duration of their lifetime. The same thing will persist in this liminal death space, and it will lead them into, again, another life. And the pornography has only further reinforced this propensity for such. That's the point. Also touching on that idea of the appetites, we can see this also in Buddhism and other religions, that this this idea of learning to control, of learning to regulate one's more base animals drives is very much also emphasized to this same reason, along the lines of the same theme, right, of removing oneself from this trap of suffering, the way that ourselves are the cause of the suffering that befalls us, because we're asleep, just acting in this knee-jerk, reactive way, without thought and such. Yeah, and it's also very strange, the fact that, going in line with the hyper-normalisation of this, to be engaging in this act of voyeurism, essentially, right? And that such a thing has been hyper-normalised. And I know that there are these very much fringe alternative theories that have been put forth, most notably by Dr. Christopher Ryan. He wrote this book called Sex at Dawn, basically details his ideas about what prehistoric sexuality was in humans, and his idea is that it's basically falls in line with basically being polygamy, right? And that people would engage in group sex and such. That was the norm, and he points towards all these different sort of aspects of human behavior and anatomical traits that are still with us to this day that sort of indicate this, sort of testify to his theory, right? So one of them says this, basically that the head of the penis is sort of acts as kind of like a plunger, right? For drawing out semen that is already sort of latent within the female that they're partnering with. As one example, basically pointing towards the fact that there was this sort of I can't think of the word, but there were frequent sexual couplings occurring. There was this, yeah, you get the idea, I think. Um, and I think that kind of covers what I wanted to talk about. It wasn't obviously not a long talk. It's just a quick idea that occurred to me, and just a few other points that were sort of loosely associated with it that I thought would be mildly engaging, perhaps. But yeah, okay.